Tennessee is a state built on water, and a state that has learned to hide things in it. Three great rivers run through it: the Mississippi along its western edge, the Tennessee looping down and back up again, the Cumberland winding through its middle, and across the 20th century, the federal government threw dams across those rivers and their tributaries until much of the state's landscape was drowned on purpose. The Tennessee Valley Authority built 29 major dams and turned the wild rivers into a chain of controlled lakes, and in the process, it flooded an enormous amount of inhabited country, the largest deliberate flooding of lived-in land in the history of the United States. Whole towns went under. Farms, churches, schools, roads, mills, and cemeteries vanished beneath hundreds of feet of water, and most of them are still down there. That history means Tennessee's lakes are not ordinary lakes, they are lids. Beneath the calm recreational surface of a place like Norris or Dale Hollow or Percy Priest lies a submerged world that people once lived in, and the water keeps it in a strange, cold, half-preserved state, giving up pieces of it only when droughts drop the levels or divers go looking. And the drowned towns are only part of it. Tennessee's waters also hold shipwrecks, disaster sites, and the more recent kind of secret, the cars and the bodies that people put into lakes hoping the water would keep them forever. What follows is a countdown of 11 underwater mysteries in Tennessee, moving from the merely haunting toward the genuinely unresolved. Some of these are documented and dated: drowned towns whose stories are written down, disasters whose facts are known. Others are the true unsolved kind, the disappearances and the recoveries where the water gave up an object but not an answer. And a few live in the borderland of local legend, where what people believe is under the surface has grown as large as anything that has actually been pulled out. The deeper this list goes, the less the water is willing to explain. Number 11 sits under Norris Lake, and it is the town that started it all. In the early 1930s, in the valley of the Clinch River in East Tennessee, there was a town called Loyston. It had been settled around the beginning of the 19th century, first by the Stooksbury family, and it grew up along what became State Highway 61 into a real community, a trading center for the local farmers, with a post office, a school, churches, a mill, and a scatter of small businesses. By the time the government came, only about 70 people lived in the town center, but the wider community around it in the Clinch River Valley was far larger, generations deep, families who had farmed that bottom land for over 100 years. Then, in 1933, the Tennessee Valley Authority chose the Clinch River as the site of its very first project, Norris Dam. The dam would rise 265 feet and stretch nearly 1,900 feet across the river, and the lake it created would flood 5 counties and drown the valley. Loyston lay directly in the path of the water. The residents were forced out by eminent domain, and though the TVA tried to establish a new Loyston nearby, it never really took, and the community scattered across the surrounding counties, never able to go home. By 1936, the dam was complete, and Loyston was gone, under the reservoir. The mystery of Loyston is not that it vanished. Its disappearance is thoroughly documented. It may be the best documented drowned town in Tennessee because before the flooding, the TVA conducted sociological surveys of its residents, and the famous photographer Lewis Hine came and photographed the doomed town. The mystery is what remains, and where. The submerged site is known today as the Loyston Sea, an arm of Norris Lake near Big Ridge State Park, and when droughts drop the water low enough, the town comes partway back. Stone foundations, road traces, and structural outlines emerging from the receding water like a photograph developing. What exactly is still down there? In what condition? How much of a 100-year-old town survives after 90 years underwater is something only the divers who descend into the Loyston Sea can say, and the water does not give it up easily. Number 10 is the road that still runs into the water and simply keeps going. In Middle Tennessee, on the eastern edge of Nashville, lies J. Percy Priest Lake, a popular recreational reservoir crowded with boaters and swimmers every summer. Most of the people enjoying it have no idea that a community lies beneath them. There was once a town called Couchville, which was relocated in the 1960s as part of the project that created the lake. The people were moved, the town was cleared, and the water came in. But the town did not entirely leave. Part of the main road of Couchville still rests at the bottom of Percy Priest Lake, a paved street that runs down into the reservoir and continues on beneath the surface, going nowhere now, connecting nothing, a road for cars in a place cars can no longer reach. A recreation area on the lake still bears the drowned community's name, one of the only clues, above the water, that a town was ever there at all. The image of that submerged road is the kind of thing that stays with a person. A road is built to be traveled, to lead somewhere, and this one still exists in full, still leads in the direction it always led, except that its destination is gone, and it lies under the recreational water of a lake near Nashville, a piece of ordinary infrastructure turned into something eerie by the simple fact of being underwater. What else of Couchville lies down there along that road? Foundations, wells, the footings of buildings, is a question the lake keeps to itself. Number 9 is the town that drowned for a second lake on the other side of the state's dam building story. When the Army Corps of Engineers built Dale Hollow Dam in north-central Tennessee, it created Dale Hollow Reservoir, and to make the lake it flooded a town called Willow Grove. The community had begun in the 18th century, its land bought from the Cherokee, and it sat on the banks of Iron Creek, named for a grove of willow trees that grew there. It had good farmland, a grist mill, several churches, and a handful of businesses, an established rural Tennessee town with more than a century of history. The Corps bought the land and flooded it, and Willow Grove earned a grim nickname that has followed it ever since: the town that drowned. The town cemetery was relocated before the water came, the dead moved to higher ground, but the rest of Willow Grove was left to the reservoir, and it remains beneath Dale Hollow Lake today. Like the other drowned towns, it reappears in fragments when the water is low, foundations and traces surfacing from the mud, a town resurfacing just far enough to remind people it exists before the water rises and takes it back. The unresolved question that hangs over Willow Grove and over all these drowned towns is a quiet and uncomfortable one. The cemeteries were supposedly relocated, the dead supposedly all moved. But the relocations were done in the 1930s and 1940s with the technology and the record-keeping of that era, and unmarked graves cannot all be found. How completely any of these towns were truly cleared of their dead, whether Willow Grove and Loyston and the others gave up all of their graves or only the ones that were marked and known, is something no one can fully answer. Some number of Tennessee's flooded towns may still hold their original residents in unmarked ground beneath the lakes, and the water is not telling. Number 8 is the enormous scale of the moved dead and the graves that history nearly forgot. The relocation of the cemeteries before the flooding was itself a vast and macabre undertaking, and its record contains its own mysteries. Around the Norris Dam project alone, thousands upon thousands of graves had to be moved. In one community near Loyston called Baker's Forge, roughly 2,000 graves had to be relocated to a new cemetery before the water came. Among them were said to be about 10 graves of Revolutionary War veterans, men who had been in the ground since the earliest days of the Republic, and it is genuinely unclear what, after a century and a half in Tennessee soil, was actually left of them to move. Nearby, Big Barren, a small town on the Clinch River, had its own dark history, made famous in 1916 by a flood that killed 25 people there. And when Norris Dam came, Big Barren too was permanently drowned, its graves relocated to a new cemetery in Union County. Across the Norris Project and the others, estimates of the total graves relocated run into the thousands, in some accounts around 5,000 from the communities in the Loyston area and surrounding valleys. And the disturbing uncertainty at the center of all of it is the same. Exhuming thousands of graves, many of them old, many of them poorly marked or unmarked entirely, in the 1930s, means that mistakes and omissions were all but inevitable. Which remains were found and which were missed, whether every grave was truly located before the water rose, is a mystery buried under the lakes themselves. The people who did the work are gone. The records are incomplete. And the dead who may have been left behind are silent, underwater that families now boat and swim across without knowing. Number 7 is the fleet of silos standing in the lake bed, a farmscape frozen underwater. One of the strangest and most haunting sights that emerges from Tennessee's reservoirs during drought is not a town, but a memory of the farmland the towns were built on. Across parts of East Tennessee, when the water drops, silos still stand in the exposed lake beds, tall concrete cylinders rising out of the mud where barns and farms once were, relics of a time when the bottom of the lake was a valley full of working agriculture. They are the tallest things that survived, too solid and too anchored to be worth removing, and so they were left, and the water rose around them, and now they wait beneath the surface, appearing only when the reservoir shrinks. There is something profoundly eerie about a silo standing at the bottom of a lake. It is an object built for dry land, for grain and harvest and the rhythms of a farm, and it stands now in the cold and the dark of a reservoir, structurally intact, pointing up toward a surface it will almost never reach again. When droughts expose these silos, they draw the curious, people who come to stand beside a farm structure that spends most of its existence underwater. Each one marks a vanished farm, a family that was moved, a piece of the drowned agricultural world that the TVA converted into a lake. How many of them stand out there, scattered across the bottoms of Tennessee's reservoirs, is not precisely known, and most of the time they are invisible, hidden under the water that took the farms they served. Number 6 moves from the deliberately drowned to the accidentally lost, and to the more recent kind of mystery that Tennessee's lakes keep producing. Tennessee's lakes are dangerous and they take people every year. In a single recent year, the state recorded more than a dozen fatal boating incidents, and its deep reservoirs, cold and dark and cluttered with the submerged remains of the drowned world, are exactly the kind of water that does not always give its victims back. When a person goes under in a lake like Norris, over 200 feet deep in places, or in any of the deep TVA reservoirs, recovery is not guaranteed. Modern rescue teams now use remotely operated vehicles and sonar to search for the missing, and even with that technology, searches can stretch for hours or days, and some victims across the decades were never recovered at all before that technology existed. This is the ongoing living mystery of Tennessee's waters, and it is the one that connects the historic drowned towns to the present day. The same depth and cold and structural clutter that preserve a submerged town also swallow swimmers and boaters, and the same reservoirs that hold 100-year-old foundations also hold an unknown number of more recent dead, people who drowned in the high water decades and sank beyond the reach of the searchers of their time. Every deep Tennessee lake is, in this sense, an open question, holding not only the history that was deliberately flooded, but the accidents that the water quietly kept. Number 5 is the growing practice of searching those waters on purpose, and what the sonar teams are starting to find. In recent years, a new kind of investigator has turned attention to Tennessee's lakes and rivers. Volunteer dive teams using sonar imaging to search for missing persons and their vehicles underwater. These teams, part of a movement that is spread across the country, take the thousands of open missing persons cases cataloged in national databases and match them against bodies of water near where people were last seen, then run sonar across the bottom looking for the unmistakable shape of a sunken car. In Tennessee and the surrounding region, this work has already begun to crack cases that stayed cold for decades. In one case in the area, a sheriff's long-held hunch led a sonar diver to scan a section of a Tennessee river, and just 13 feet below the surface, he located a car that had been missing for over 2 decades, with the remains of 2 young people still inside, a disappearance that turned out to be a decades-old traffic accident the water had hidden all along. The lesson these teams keep learning is that the evidence is often not deeply hidden at all, but sitting a few feet down in ordinary water that no one had thought to search. And the larger mystery they are uncovering is one of scale. Nobody knows how many cars and how many people are resting on the bottoms of Tennessee's lakes and rivers right now, unsearched and unfound, waiting for a sonar beam to catch their shape. Every recovery raises the same haunting question of how many more are still down there. Number 4 is a legend, and it should be treated as one. but it is the kind of legend that clings to deep Tennessee lakes and refuses to let go. Around the state's largest and deepest reservoirs, a body of dark folklore has grown up, the same kind that attaches to deep water everywhere. People tell stories of divers who went down into the drowned towns and would not go back, of scuba divers who descended toward submerged buildings and were so unnerved by the standing structures looming in the dark that they surfaced and never returned. There are whispered claims of divers who died exploring the flooded ruins, of a level below which no one will go, of things glimpsed in the cold water at the edge of a flashlight beam. This is lore, not fact, the natural mythology of places that are genuinely frightening to enter, and it should be held at arm's length. But the reason the legends persist is that the underlying reality is authentically unsettling. Diving into a drowned town is a real and genuinely dangerous thing to do. In the deep TVA reservoirs, the water is cold and often nearly black. Visibility can drop to almost nothing, and the submerged environment is full of standing structures, walls, foundations, trees, and old buildings that can disorient and trap a diver. The preservation in that cold, low-oxygen water can be uncanny, with structures and trees still upright decades after the flooding, a whole townscape frozen in the dark. A diver descending into that does not need a ghost to be in danger. The town itself is the hazard. The legends are stories. The drowned buildings waiting in the black water, ready to snag a diver who ventures too far in, are real, and that is why the stories never quite die. Number 3 is the disaster that Tennessee has never quite let itself remember, resting under a field that used to be a river. America's deadliest maritime disaster did not happen at sea. It happened in the Mississippi River, just north of Memphis, Tennessee, in the early morning hours of April 27, 1865, and it is very much a Tennessee story. The steamboat Sultana, a sidewheeler built to carry fewer than 400 people, was grotesquely overloaded that night with something on the order of 2,000 or more passengers, the vast majority of them Union soldiers just released from Confederate prison camps at Andersonville and Cahaba, sick and starved and desperate to get home after surviving the Civil War. The overcrowding was driven by money. The government paid steamboat operators a per-head fee for every soldier carried north, and the greed to fill the boat overrode every caution, including a boiler that had been hastily and inadequately patched at Vicksburg rather than properly repaired. At about 2 in the morning, 7 or 8 miles north of Memphis, 3 of the Sultana's 4 boilers exploded. The blast tore the boat apart, sent fire and scalding steam through the packed decks, and threw hundreds of men into a Mississippi that was swollen to flood stage and running miles wide. Men who had survived years of war and the horror of prison camps burned to death, drowned, or died of hypothermia in the cold water in the dark. Among the dead were hundreds of Tennesseans, many from the 3rd Tennessee Cavalry, East Tennessee Unionists who had endured capture and imprisonment only to die within reach of home. Estimates of the death toll range from around 1,200 to as many as 1,800, exceeding the death toll of the Titanic, which would sink 47 years later. And here is where it becomes a genuine underwater, or rather underground, mystery. The Sultana was overshadowed almost immediately, its catastrophe buried in the news by Lincoln's assassination and the death of his killer just days before, and the disaster faded from national memory. The wreck itself vanished too. After it burned and sank, the Sultana was covered over with sand and silt, and then the Mississippi did what the Mississippi does and changed its course, moving east and leaving the buried steamboat behind. Today, the remains of the Sultana are believed to lie not under the river at all, but beneath an Arkansas soybean field a couple of miles from the current channel, located by a researcher in 1982 but never raised. The deadliest ship disaster in American history, a Tennessee tragedy that killed more people than the Titanic, lies dormant and largely unexcavated under farmland, its exact state and contents still a matter of investigation. A mass grave that the river drowned, buried, and then walked away from. Number 2 returns to the drowned towns. but to the deepest question they pose, the one about how much of a vanished world can persist beneath the water. The individual towns, Loyston, Willow Grove, Couchville, Big Barren, Baker's Forge, and the others, are documented. But taken together, they represent a mystery larger than any one of them. The existence, beneath Tennessee's recreational lakes, of an entire submerged civilization that has never been comprehensively explored. When droughts lower the reservoirs, they reveal tantalizing glimpses, foundations, road beds, silos, the outlines of streets, structures emerging from the mud, artifacts scattered across exposed lake beds. But those glimpses are partial and fleeting, and most of the time the drowned world is sealed under the water, unmapped in any complete way, known only from old photographs and the memories of people who are nearly all gone now. What actually lies at the bottom of these lakes, in full, is not truly known. The reservoirs cover enormous areas. Norris alone has over 800 miles of shoreline, and the submerged towns and farms and roads and cemeteries beneath them have never been fully surveyed. Divers who explore the drowned towns describe finding structures still standing, sometimes with details intact, preserved by the cold, dark water in ways that surprise them. But no one has systematically documented most of it, and the water, the depth, and the danger keep it that way. Somewhere beneath the pleasure boats of East and Middle Tennessee lies a frozen landscape of the 1930s, whole and quiet, and the full inventory of what survives down there, which buildings, which objects, which graves, remains one of the state's great unexplored mysteries, hidden in plain sight beneath water that millions of people enjoy every year without ever looking down. And that leaves number one, the mystery that ties the drowned towns to the sonar teams to the missing, the single most unresolved thing about Tennessee's waters. Number one is the people the lakes are still hiding, and the near certainty that the water holds far more than has ever been found. Everything on this list points in the same direction. Tennessee deliberately flooded an unprecedented amount of inhabited land, moving thousands of graves under 1930s conditions that could not possibly have found them all. Its deep reservoirs have taken swimmers and boaters for nearly a century, some never recovered. Its rivers hid a car with two bodies for over 2 decades, just 13 feet down, until a sonar team happened to look. Volunteer divers keep pulling cars and remains out of southern lakes and rivers that no one had ever searched, and every recovery makes clear how much has never been searched at all. And the deadliest ship disaster in the nation's history lies buried and largely untouched under an old riverbed near Memphis. Put it all together, and the conclusion is genuinely disturbing. No one knows how many dead are in Tennessee's waters, not the historic dead of the drowned towns whose graves may have been missed, and not the modern dead, the drowning victims never recovered, and the missing persons whose cars may be resting on lake beds no sonar has yet crossed. The state's rivers and reservoirs function as an enormous, silent, largely unexamined repository, holding a flooded civilization, a buried disaster, and an unknown number of the lost, all of it kept in cold, dark water that gives up its secrets only when a drought lowers the level, or a diver goes looking, or a hunch finally sends someone to scan the right stretch of river. For most of what is down there, that moment has not come. It is still there now, underwater that looks like nothing at all, and the mystery is not whether Tennessee's lakes are hiding things. It is how much and who, and whether anyone will ever look in the right place. The lakes are lowering more often as droughts come and go. The sonar technology is improving and spreading. The searches are expanding. And piece by piece, drought by drought, dive by dive, Tennessee's waters are being made to give back what they have been holding for as long as 90 years. But the water is patient, and it is deep, and it has kept its secrets a long time. Most of them, it is keeping still. If this kind of story stays with you, the drowned history of Tennessee and the questions its waters refuse to answer, there is far more beneath the surface than any single video can hold. There are the individual drowned towns, Loyston and Willow Grove and Couchville, each with its own full story of the families who were forced out and the world that went under. There is the Sultana, the forgotten disaster that killed more Americans than the Titanic and lies buried under an Arkansas field. And there are the modern sonar teams whose recovered footage is cracking open decades-old Tennessee cold cases in real time. Tell us which of those depths to descend into next.